Okay, it's May 31st, 2017. Lily, I'm going to do a recording to spare you an interview, so you should be thankful. Exactly. All right. So a couple things. I mean, I think that, to me, as I've read the book, I think it the kind of general premise, the central kind of conflict, the log line, if you will, is something like, paralyzingly shy 9-year-old girl has to overcome her fears to bring her an invention to market for her grandfather. And, along the way is thrust onto stage and talk shows in the White House and blah, blah, blah. And so I think, to that we've got to, some of the background has to be laid a bit that, I think I've told this story, but Lily literally at 7 was so shy that she wouldn't order from a server at a Starbucks or a Subway. She'd literally hide behind me and say, "You order for me." And I think it's kind of important to establish that was really, school had just so eroded her confidence that I think most of this is in there, but it may need to be fleshed out a bit. That she just, it really did lead her to not feeling like she was good at anything anymore. That led her to her famous "what am I good at" question. And I think some of the, there's no real villain in the story. We have to set up some of these difficulties. And one of them, we've got the NPR Weekend Edition interview with Scott Simon's story. I'll flesh that out a little bit from my standpoint, because it really is a very dramatic kind of thing. And I think I've put some of this, but sometimes it's easier to do it just by voice, and you can take a look and see if it's adequately captured. But we got to Navy Pier with plenty of time, a half hour, went to the washroom and stuff, and the address of WBZ's office is 848 West Grand, and Chicago's laid out on a grid. You think no big deal, and you start getting out there, and there's signs for a period, and then it just eventually spits you out on the boardwalk. And we, so time is running out. We're supposed to get there 15 minutes before. We're there, and we've left plenty of time, but it's piece by piece, it's getting eroded. I'm feverishly calling, but I have a couple numbers, and one of the numbers is a woman in D.C. who has no idea where the Chicago office is. And then the person whose name I have in Chicago is, we later learn, in the recording booth. She's not answering her phone, and nobody can put us in contact with anyone who can tell us where this is. And nobody, like on the boardwalk, Bubba Gum Shrimp, nobody knows where it is. And we walk to the end of the pier, and there's no numbers anywhere except for one. The only number we could find, which is actually on the north side of the pier, is like some old antique thing that's 800. Not west, but east. Must be east. And so we actually think, okay, well, then it must be further out by the pier. There's absolutely nothing there. There's like ballrooms and some kind of, convention halls, and there's no one there to talk to. And now we're running around more and more feverishly as, the clock is ticking. We're getting closer and closer. This is Scott Simons. I mean, he's interviewed, world leaders and multiple presidents, heads of state, and all kinds of stuff. And this is our first national interview, and it's terrible. And it's finally, racing around, and I like break into a run, and like half I'm gonna, Lily can't really key up, and she's like, I don't know, had some ice cream, and now it's hot, and she's like doubled over with a stomach ache and crying, and it's really horrific. And I like, kind of go ahead a little bit, but I don't want to totally leave her alone. I kind of dragging her by the hand, and finally we find that was a red herring, that 800 grand, and we go back and we realize that the WBZ office, which nobody has told us, and to this day I want to write a letter to Scott Simons, because it really is as you see the story, and you realize that the WBZ office doesn't face out to the boardwalk, faces inside. It's like hidden, and it opens to a parking lot, in the middle where you'd never find it. I don't even know how we finally figured it out and got up there, and we were we're supposed to be there 15 minutes late. We were probably a few minutes. We were supposed to be there 15 minutes early. We were probably a few minutes late. And then this woman in the recording booth is like totally oblivious, and she lets us sit there for another, 10 minutes. And Lily's like doubled over, and just like, it's horrible. And I'm like, well, Lily, you want to keep going? She's like, I don't know. It was terrible. And then anyway, so this woman kind of like two negatives canceling, mercifully, we didn't know it at the time, but like took longer, and she was like didn't realize that the show was on, and let's sit there for another 10 minutes, and we get on, and then they're having trouble connecting this satellite. So Scott Simons is in Washington, we're in WBZ, and they specifically brought us in so we wouldn't have to do it over the telephone, with this, super link, but it wasn't working, and she had to like restart the machine. It's going back and forth, and we can hear him, and he can't hear us, so he doesn't realize we can hear him. He's like, what's going on? It was supposed to be, 20 minutes ago. And I'm like, he's like late to pick up his girls or something. He has two adopted girls about Lily's age. And I had like, tweeted him beforehand for that, or, so we made some small connection, which might have been why he even stayed. But this, this really sweet guy, he's getting very frustrated. He's held back from work an extra half hour, long after he's supposed to record this little kind of, human interest piece of, kind of very little importance to their show or whatever. And, but he does stay, and finally they get it. And, we do the interview, and the interview is fine, but it's very low energy. If you listen, it's not a great interview. And the reason is because we were so like, I wasn't sure if Lily was going to throw up from running around being doubled over. It was really quite horrible. And so anyway, we do that interview. It was just fine. He was a really nice guy. And it would have been that the biggest thing about it is it really would have been, I would have really just hated myself, had we missed it, because it really was our first national coverage. It was such a big opportunity, and this one was after the that Meredith Viera interview, which I think I've told you about. I'll record that again if I haven't, but because that's a kind of important story. But and it was really, that was she had to miss her audition for that WB, so it was really a tough period, because Lily was really into this JCC play, and this was her big senior chance, and they go by seniority in this, and she was going to miss the audition. She was really vastly more distraught over that than kind of a lot of the stuff with the Kangaroo Cups of the story at this point. And I remember after that, we sat on the pier and watched the birds and kind of decompressed. And, Lily was really, I remember, talking to her. She's like, I don't want to be a motivational speaker. And I'm like, well, Lily, I think you could do a lot of things. I don't know. I don't see any path. And it was really sort of a brutal experience. I mean, it was definitely, there was a lot of soul searching. And it was really it was not an easy kind of experience for either of us. Do you remember that as particularly traumatic, or that's been totally purged from your memory?
Not totally, but I don't remember that much from it.
You don't remember? Do you remember as
I remember bigger details from it, but I don't really remember a lot.
Do you remember it being like a painful experience, or just sort of like a shrug?
It wasn't fun, but
you got past it,
yeah.
And you grew. And you learned you could do it, and go through a gut ache. It helped you to build your confidence. All right, what do you think of that? Anything else you want to add, Lily? No? All right, so that's that on that one. And I will, where I'm at it, do you remember, I don't know if it's in the book. I apologize if I'm repeating myself, Zay, but Lily, do you remember that Meredith Viera interview? It was supposed to be a quick time, or FaceTime, and this was prior to I'm almost sure. Well, I don't remember. I think it was prior to. We'd have to look. I'm pretty sure. I'll look. Or you got the spreadsheet there. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that Meredith Viera was before Weekend Edition, and that one was, we had this young intern, and there'd been some tough interviews prior to that. So the Ellen DeGeneres, so there's some young interview that interviewed Lily for the Ellen DeGeneres blog, and that seemed like it might have been a feeder to the Ellen DeGeneres show, who knows, and there was a tough interview. It was a young gal, she probably wasn't very familiar with kids, and she was asking Lily, and it was phone, which is, was always Lily's least favorite because she couldn't connect with somebody, and she was asking Lily these crazy questions like, what are the molds made of? And Lily's looking at me like, what the hell kind of question is this? It was relatively early, and so we got the Ellen DeGeneres blog thing, but it wasn't that great. And there had been some good phone interviews, some not so great, depending on the interviewer. But then we had this FaceTime, which was going to be better, and this was with Meredith Viera. She had been on The View, and she was starting her own show, and one of her interns, producer people or whatever, was going to interview Lily with FaceTime. And so Chris took Lily out to breakfast. Do you remember this?
I think so.
And
I remember the breakfast.
You just remember the breakfast? Lily remembers the breakfast part. Well, anyway, so then Chris took Lily out to breakfast to, get her up in plenty of time. And we set it up, and we get her on FaceTime. And, okay, it all works, no technical trouble. And, turn the camera to Lily. And she's like, okay, Lily. And Lily's like, I'm tired. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, Lily, tell your story about the kangaroo cut. By now she's told it many times. I was like, I'm tired. And that was it. And so Lily was not up for it, and that was the end of that. And surprisingly, we were not on the Meredith Viera show. So that was the only time Lily's ever had stage fright like that. The only time before then or since. And then Chris was totally devastated, and that was where we said that Lily is like the Roadrunner. The anvil never hurts, just never hits her. And I'm like the coyote, and the anvil hits me and sort of pancakes me, but next scene I can bounce back. And many of the people that we've traveled with on this adventure they're like regular humans. And when the anvil drops on them, they go to the hospital. And but a long painful recovery, Lily says. Right, but Lily's not like that, and so. That was I'm like, oh my God. And Chris was just devastated. She's like, this is horrible. I'm going to lay down. And I'm like, well, Lily, what do you want to do? And Lily, to this day, the answer is 90% of the time the same thing. I don't know. And so I'm like, all right, I think the show must go on. And we had two more interviews that day. One of them was this faith radio station in Florida. And it was Lily's best interview ever. She talked about the nose pillow and had these self-deprecating jokes. And, she did it on the phone. It was terrific. And that was it. And so she just bounced back. So I think some of these ups and downs are really important, and how, it really was, this huge journey. I mean, you talk about her getting interviewed by Melissa Harris, and she'd never been interviewed by anyone. Well, the closest she'd been to getting interviewed was probably, getting interviewed by a Starbucks barista for what she wanted, and that was a no-go. Lily was not up for it, so that tells you something about the journey and what she had to overcome. And I think that, that stakes and somewhere in there from her perspective should be in there. So there's that.